Hello and welcome to Scilence, a podcast that gives women in science, technology, engineering and maths, or STEM, an opportunity to share honestly and openly about what it's really like working in these typically male-dominated subjects. Each week, one woman shares her stories and experiences. She could be a public figure, the girl next door, or someone from a far-off land. The point is she'll be deliberately kept anonymous and disguised to ensure that we're not distracted by the details of her achievements, her labels, or what she looks like. I'm Dr. Shanice O'Mara, also a woman in STEM. I studied mechanical engineering and ended up as a television broadcaster. I've worked on and reported on some cutting-edge technology and innovation over the years, and through my television work, I've met some incredible women from a diverse range of STEM fields. And you know what? I've been more amazed about what I've learned from these women when the cameras have been turned off and they're just being themselves. These women have amazingly impressive CVs, but most importantly, they're human, just like the rest of us, and it's their off-air honesty that I'd love to share with you through Scilence. It's my hope that you'll really relate to what's shared with you today and that you're inspired, supported and comforted as I always am when I chat with these wonderful women. If so, please do subscribe to Scilence and leave comments. I'd love to have your feedback. This week, my guest is in the field of emerging telecommunications technology. Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
Very good. Thank you for doing this. I think what you say is so true about how we are when the cameras are turned off and kind of trying to capture that. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, my experience has always been that, when the cameras are turned on or we're giving a speech or any kind of presentation of our expertise, we're always kind of armored up to be
Hmm.
a certain persona. And when those cameras are turned off or the speech is done and you're kind of backstage, that's when you really get the true essence of a person. And to be honest, that's often the most inspiring part of my job. Yeah, I mean, do you work with many women?
Yes and no. So it is kind of strange because it's mostly male dominated. About, I think, 75% male is what, we were told
Gosh.
about our company because we started asking these questions.
Mm,
So that is pretty bad, yeah. And
yeah.
the thing is that they, I had a colleague who jokingly called it the pink ghetto. So, the women are in HR, they are in marketing, and no disrespect to those areas at all. But even in a telecom company, the greater percentage of women, and they have so few, will be in more support kind of
Mm,
roles
yeah.
to the main product. Like they're not the product managers or they're not
Yeah.
the developers.
So, what role do you have?
So I do something very interesting. I joke that I do hand waving, but basically I have a background in software engineering. But what I do today is kind of explore this intersection of leading edge telecommunications technology with the emerging ecosystem. And then I'm trying to work towards getting more of an in-depth, crafting of a solution. Like what are the pain points in different verticals that we have? How can we solve it with technology? So sort of bridging more of that gap between telecommunications and the world out there. I mean, we are really good at understanding our own product, but sometimes we don't see what the world will do with it. I mean, I think that's happened with just your cell phone, right? When we had the smartphone, a lot of people who were in the industry developing these phones were like, people are not really going to watch video on this thing. You've got televisions for that, or you've got a laptop, or you've got an alarm clock. And
Yeah.
I think unless you are looking out to see what we are surprised in the industry by what people do with our technology, to be honest.
Mm,
So I'm trying not to have that surprise because surprises can mean we are not pitching our product for the right solution. We are not putting in the right solutions into our
mm.
technology. So I'm trying to bring some of the outside world in and take some of this out and tell the creative people, like, here's what we have. What are you going to do with it?
And how did you get into a career like this? Was this something you dreamed of doing when you were a child?
No. So, like a lot of engineers, I was introvert as a child. I loved to read, and I always think I was a little more organized at home. So my mom's the one I think who planted this in my head that this one she can do science. That was all she knew. She didn't know what I would do, but because I have a couple of sisters and both of them are more artistic and clearly I was not. So I think sort of that helped to reinforce the fact that I was a little more organized in my thinking, or I like to get to read encyclopedias and do some of that stuff. So I sort of stumbled into it. I really wanted to be an astronaut, and that was just driven by watching Carl Sagan and Cosmos and being inspired by all of that beauty of the universe. Plus, I think I like the abstractness that physics has, so I kind of went into physics initially as my degree. Uh, I was a bit miserable there too because, I had these teachers and the- who were not the most forward looking in terms of what I wanted to do. They were more about the mechanics of the physics itself. And and then I kind of got interested in software, so I went off and pursued another degree in, computer software engineering because that was exciting. You could do a lot and you could be a little creative with software. I think I wanted to bring a little bit of that into my life too. Plus, I was being practical. Like, how many people really get to go into
Mm.
space? And I need a real job. But I did get very interested in that. And then somewhere along the way, while doing my computer software engineering, I sort of got sidetracked a little bit and pursued a lot of courses in psychology because I got really interested there. So I was drifting, but I think it's all helping me now in where I am. At that time, I was not like with a clear purpose that this is what I want to do. But now it's all sort of coming together very organically, which is cool.
So I'm actually very curious that you've got sisters that were more artistic. When you were growing up, did you feel weird or different? Or, I mean,
Yeah, a little bit. Not much. We are very tight knit, but I felt more uncool and I was okay with it. But because, they were the ones who could draw and paint, but then they also had, and not to generalize, I mean that not everyone's like this, but a little more temperamental perhaps, and I was a little more the quieter, just reading and doing my thing. So, I mean, we're all passionate readers, but I think the way we expressed ourselves was a little different, where I would be more like, even if my mom had to discipline me, like she couldn't just do it with like a timeout or whatever. She would reason with me. I needed that. Like I needed the logic. I needed a little bit of that. So I think that's where I was a bit more different, where it wouldn't work if she just said, "Oh, you can't go to do this or take away a privilege." But if she worked with me, then I would never do that behavior again. That was what she would tell me is how I was even when I was pretty young.
gosh, that's so adorable.
I hope so. I like to think so, but my mom might disagree.
I'm just trying to imagine you as a little girl and just kind of, were you always following your achievements, or was it a dream, or what was driving you?
Yeah, I think it was very internal and it was my own my own sort of awakening about, especially about physics and the cosmos, and how things really are so marvelous because the cosmos is so beautiful. It's infinitely large and then it's infinitesimally small because you get into the subatomic particles and everything, and then you just have a whole universe that's micro as well as the whole universe that's macro. I think I was just fascinated by that. So I really wanted to explore this just for myself, and I had this dream that maybe I would be somebody who gets to go into space and sees it for myself. And I did enjoy math, and I think it was a lot of reading about Kepler and all that. It was really the astrophysics side that was fascinating. So it's very interesting that I'm in telecom now. So the only thing that I get to use from that background is understand, the radio waves, the millimeter wave, and all that spectrum. And that's fascinating for me as well. Like, the properties of our electromagnetic spectrum is so different at the different bands.
Mm,
And engineering gave me, I think, that discipline a little bit because physics can be pretty
yeah.
abstract and you can get lost
Mm,
somewhere. And I had heard a joke where they talk about astrophysicists who jot down a theory on a napkin in the morning, and then in the afternoon they find that one flaw, and you have to throw it all away. And I think it's very hard to make a really practical living out of it. And within school and everything, I think I realized that I do want to work, and I got interested in what can I do now. Okay, I know this. Now I want to do something in this world as
mm.
well, and then have my dreams about space and everything, but do something here too.
Well, I must say, just in the first few minutes of talking to you, you sound exceptional. And, you sound
No.
unique. Um, I mean, are there many people like you? And if not, how did you cope with being, quite different to most girls?
Yeah, actually, that's true. I was a little different in school. And being an introvert, I guess I didn't, being popular or something wasn't a big thing for me. I would rather have a quieter conversation with one or two people. And I have my best friend, my bestie from first grade, and we're still very close friends today.
Oh.
So I think I just look at that long arc of time, and we're in completely different worlds now. But when we talk, we just so happy for each other, and really, that's all that matters. Sometimes is you have that connection. So and yeah, a lot of people did call me a little weird or different, but it was just who I was. I figured I'm not cool, and that was okay with me. And I think it was good to be comfortable with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't aspire to it because I never thought I would be it. So in a way, it took some of the pressure off that I could be a little weird. And as I grew up, I think I had friends who were boys, and I joke that they helped me deal with this world where it's all sometimes they are older than me, but they are really boys in in how they react.
Mm.
So I joke about that, and that's given me some of the resilience, I think, to deal with being in a male dominated world and still able to have my friends and do my thing.
Mm. That's so interesting because I think often girls who have a real STEM potential don't realize it because of peer pressure and trying to look cool. So it sounds like you managed to escape that obstacle.
Yeah, and the older I get, the more thankful I am because that's a trap you get into. And we know this from the research, right? We know that girls are, especially even little girls, are more likely to be praised for being pretty and cute and that's lovely what they're wearing, and which is all very nice to do. I mean, I embrace that, but that doesn't that feeds into something that you tell yourself. Then that pressure gets on that, and what you said is very true because when I was in university, I had this really brilliant girl who was my classmate. And, she was very feminine, long hair, lovely, and very interested in theater and everything. And we are multi potential, right? Just because I'm in STEM doesn't mean I don't like
Mm.
art. I love it. But it's just what do I want to do with my life? That's different. I admire those who create art and all that, but it's not like either or. But I remember with this friend of mine in college, and she would be a little defensive, like, yes, I like engineering, but I'm not a nerd. I like theater and everything. So she would take pains to add that, but I'm
Mm.
also this. And in a way that to me diminished the fact that, hey, embrace it, love what you're doing and why you're doing it. But I think that comes on sometimes, that pressure with everyone. And I think the switch starts to happen around high school
Yeah, it
because at
does.
younger ages in junior high, everyone's almost the same crazy, you know, impulsive things you're doing, and you know what you like and not. And then as you get to high school, that's when the difference starts where
Well, the self consciousness kicks in.
yeah, and then all the insecurities kick in, right? If
Exactly.
I'm different, I'm not going to be accepted, and then I feel the teasing. And there's all of this that goes with high school for everybody, and you don't want to add that burden by being a little more different than others.
So, is that how you managed to escape?
It's interesting because at that age in my life, my parents had moved to a couple different cities, so I was dealing with all of the pressure of being the new student, and that was hard on me because I think I like I said, just with my friend who I've had since childhood, that was all very strong bonds that I was breaking and going to a new place. So it was very difficult. And being an introvert and being shy, I sort of retreated into myself. And the funny thing is that, up until almost through junior high and everything, I was in a co-ed school, so boys and girls. And then I went into a a school that was all girl, and that to me was an adjustment. It was hard. I was not used to having only girls, and I feel that's, I mean, there's people who do this for different reasons, and they say it's sometimes better for girls to be in an all-girls school, but I was miserable. I think I'm better when I have some guys as friends as well, and I need sort of a little bit of both. And I have girlfriends too who I'm very close to, but I have guy friends that I'm very close to. So I think I was going through all of that at the time, that it was a bigger hairball to deal with, so to speak.
It sounds like you never questioned yourself.
For the most part, I didn't. So I was lucky that I escaped some of the teenage angst that a lot of people go through with figuring out who they really are. And my mom would call it like being a little stubborn, where I'm easygoing,
Mm.
for a lot of things, even at home or whatever. I can be flexible, whatever. But there's certain part of me, if you come at it there and tell me you need to change this, I'm like, no. And my mom would joke, and my mom and I are very close, so that's why I keep referring to her, and my dad as well. And she would joke that you're like a bull. You just sit there and nothing will budge you, There's that rock solid core of stubbornness somewhere inside this crazy happy person. And I think that's something that I just had, and I'm fortunate. I don't know how I got it or how it really manifested itself, but I'm finding that the more I tap into that, it gives me a clarity like, no, this is who I am and this is what I want to do. And every time I don't listen to that sort of, inner voice telling me that, I think I go drift and I wander around, and then I'm like, okay, why did I listen to so and so?
So you were a child who really had a strong sense of self.
Yeah, and it wasn't a very strong personality in how it manifested, externally or something. People saw me as shy, quiet, whatever,
Yeah.
but somewhere it was there. Like just a simple thing when I took physics initially, my parents were a little, are you sure you want to do physics? I mean, they're fully supportive and everything, but they're like, do you think you'd rather do chemistry instead or something? And I'm like, at that time, I'm like rock solid, stubborn. No, this is what I want to do. I don't know what I'm going to do with it or whatever. And, it's harder to score marks in physics compared to chemistry because physics is more abstract. But I was like, this is what I want to do. So there are those times.
Did you have a plan?
No, no.
So did you want to do physics because you enjoyed it?
Yeah, I think that's all it was. I enjoyed it and I was fascinated by the universe, and I thought this would give me all the answers, but in our education system today it doesn't. I had to do my reading on the side, and that didn't give me class credit. So, but it's okay. And it's all good, I think.
So you had a true interest from the beginning. That's so beautiful, really, to s- to imagine this little girl who just was fascinated and just kept following her fascination.
Yeah, and when I was very little, my mom jokes that she should have known it because one day I started crying and she said, "Why?" And it was because I wanted the moon. So she couldn't comfort me with other toys, and I was like, I
Oh,
just want the moon.
oh. How important were or are your parents as inspirational role models?
Oh my God. I can't even. They are amazing. They are self-made. My dad had nothing, literally nothing, like very, very poor. I can't even tell you. He was in debt when he was in college, and he was the oldest of his siblings. So he worked, put himself through school. He worked, he put money aside, he educated his siblings because he lost his dad at a young age. And he he made himself so extraordinary. And that's why I'm here where I am, because otherwise, poverty closes all these doors to you, right? You don't get the good education, you don't get exposure, you don't even think beyond the next day. He was literally at that point where he didn't know if he would be eating at the end of the week or not. So to see what he did with his life, I just feel like I have to push myself so that I can, just live up to a little bit of what he did for me and for our family.
Is he in STEM?
He is not. So that's funny. I'm the only one in my immediate family who is in STEM. So my dad is very much, into finance and numbers, and he's a business-oriented person. My mom has been with economics, but she loves philosophy and all these other things. And my sisters have been artistic. So I'm the only STEM in our little family.
Gosh, so you really just were following a curiosity rather than have some genetic disposition.
Yeah. Or a family where, it was done, so it was familiar. No, this was new. So I was the only one.
It's very courageous.
Yeah, I don't see it that way. Yeah, but they always encourage me because they would were the ones who, on my birthday, would buy me the encyclopedias, and mom would say, yeah, and dad would say, yeah, she's going to be. And I think somewhere they wanted me to pick medicine because it's easier. They were
Mm,
thinking for women, and they're aware of all that. And for a woman to be an engineer is more difficult. For a woman to be a doctor is definitely, you can do a lot of things. But I just was not interested in medicine at all.
was there any of that kind of Asian pressure that we get? Because, parents tend to really, Asian parents tend to really push the importance of education. Did you ever have that?
It was taken for granted that, of course, we would all go to college and get degrees. And beyond that, not much. So it wasn't like, you read about tiger moms and everything that you have to excel in this and get all above, 99%. And then you have to do the music and you have to do other things. So that wasn't
Yeah.
it wasn't there, but it was definitely taken for granted that yes, you are going to go to college. There's no question. And you know, of course, yeah, there was some grumbling about when we didn't get good grades, but not like really bad because the other thing was that I got much better grades than my sister, so I think I escaped some of that.
The
But
pressure,
it
yeah.
was okay. Yeah, it was
You
okay.
the eldest?
And no, I'm the middle one, the troubled middle child.
You
So
really
that's
don't sound
me. No, I
troubled to
joke.
me.
No, I'm not. I just joke about it. So my mom, I mean, she had her own fears because my dad had a heart attack pretty young. So she just wanted us to all get married and settle down, before anything more happened to him. And those fears did infect us because for a while, they were like, why do you need to study so much? Go get married. And all the pressure from family and relatives and everything. And that's when I was very stubborn. No, I have to study. I have to do this. So a lot of people get pressured, and the fears of the family and everything kind of infect you.
Mm.
And we had our moments like that where, because dad was ill and then mom was worried, and suddenly everyone's telling her, you got to get these girls all married off because, my God.
But you stuck to your guns, right?
Yeah,
You
that's when luckily that stubborn mule came out, and I'm like, no, 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 no. But I don't know where I got it from, but I'm so glad I had it because I know a lot of people who would succumb to, those kinds of pressures and then lose their voice, and or even with their husbands, they become secondary.
Yeah, yeah. And I think what is a very important message that you've conveyed is you will get other people's opinions that maybe contradict your own, but it's really important to have conviction. I think sometimes it can be very confusing, the difference between conviction and rebelliousness.
True. I think that's true. And I think you'll go through bad. I went through my bad years too, like with depression and, not just being broken, right? I mean, I was very ill,
Mm.
I was broken, and then I couldn't have kids, so that was a big thing, and it affects you, but also how other people see you sort of, gets very judgmental about you and stuff. And
I think sometimes choice can be quite a difficult thing to have because when you have choice, you don't know what the right thing to choose is.
no, but there'll be those holes in your life because I didn't, plan this whole life out. But for example, I went through fertility treatments and they said there's nothing wrong with you, but we don't know why. And so then, suffered couple miscarriages, went through the whole crap with all the hormone therapy and all the emotions it brings. Oh my God. And then I think you hit sort of rock bottom, and then one day I just went and my husband and I, we went straight to the art museum from the fertility clinic, and I'm
Mm.
like, I'm just going to be here. And and then I started being grateful for what I have. And I said, we have this life, we have this, and let's let's go, let's live
Mm.
slowly. It takes a long time to shut out all those voices and all the
Yeah.
disappointments that
Yeah.
you bring, because my parents were my mom was in tears because she's like, you've got a house and all, who are you going to leave it to? And I'm like, I have
Mm.
niece and nephew, I'm going to leave it to them. And I'm like, it's
But that wasn't your choice, right? I mean, this was a health issue that, you didn't ask for.
yeah, it was a health issue. And then people tell you you should adopt and everything,
Right.
and there's always a choice, right? And I think I got to a point where I just shut it all out because it was too much, it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
overwhelming. And then I said, I'm just going to live. Let it come if it comes. So I
Yeah.
love kids. I do all this fun stuff with nephews, nieces, and I really don't have a problem with adopting. But somehow I don't know, it's not happening, and I'm not forcing it.
I think that's what I mean by choice. Because, they a lot of friends are now egg freezing and
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is very emotional, and it's like I know a friend told me like a woman she knows went through 11 IVF cycles. I went through two. It was
oh
brutal.
my gosh.
And I said, at what cost am I doing this? Because I'm hurting my body, I'm hurting, everything. And uh, it's the hormones and everything, they're pumping you with drugs. So it's very unnatural. And somehow I think that also freed me up a little bit, because that's the first time I started getting these severe emotional things with anger.
Yeah.
And okay, I've had enough. And so I was able to use some of that, because they give you hormones and they give you steroids. So roid rage and then
Uh,
the emotional swing. It's
yeah.
pretty nasty.
Yeah.
And the way drugs are tailored nowadays, they are not really customized. So I always feel like I overreact to drugs. Like,
Yeah.
I have all the symptoms on the box, the side effects,
Right.
and you want to. I don't know. There's no right answer.
The right answer is to really respect yourself. Um,
Yeah, and respect their choices,
yeah.
and really just I have to thank Maya Angelou. I quote her all the time because she says all these things. I did then what I knew how to do, and now that I know better, I do better.
Mm.
And it's very forgiving and it's very lovely, and it's okay, tomorrow then I'll know even better, so I'll do even better.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so self-compassionate.
Yeah, and that's what we don't do. We're gentle to everyone, but not to ourselves.
I mean, I'm actually really fascinated with the fact that you had such a strong sense of self, yet you're an introvert. I mean, actually thinking about it, it sounds logical.
Yeah, I think it was overwhelming for me to have too many people. And then there were these few people that I would be very close to. And then I think I would chatter with them for hours, and that was fine.
Mm.
But, I can't talk to too many people. And then I need to retreat even now, I do a lot of public events. For example, I do these large trade shows and whatnot. But sometimes I go and find a little corner somewhere and just hide for a few
Mm.
minutes, and that just recharges me. Being an introvert but is okay, but you need to learn how to communicate regardless whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. And I think that's something I learned quite later in life, learning to speak and to express my thoughts more clearly than just taking it all inwards.
What made you realize you needed that skill?
Life. Yeah, basically life, you get pushed around if you don't express yourself clearly. And I think it leads to some confusion in your own mind when you're not clear. you know when you start to say things, it starts to become real sometimes, or you can put words to those feelings so that you can categorize them, that okay, this is why I'm frustrated and I need to express it, so that it doesn't linger. So there's a lot of little pieces like that. And I think going through the ups and downs in our industry as well, I was doing all this work, but I think during the early part of my career, it was very flat. Because they had in the US, which is where I'm based, and I started my career here, there was this hiring freezes, there were layoffs, so there was, no opportunity to get the promotions and everything. And I started realizing that I was diminishing myself by not expressing myself clearly in meetings and everything. So it's a very long path that I took, and eventually I have to give a plug into Toastmasters as well, which helped me.
Interesting.
I just
Yeah.
did it because I never saw myself as a public speaker, and I said, a friend of mine actually took me and said, "Do something for yourself." And she said, "Come with me, let's go do this." And we went, and it was fun. And then I started really enjoying, that process of putting my thoughts and verbalizing them. I was very good at writing. I love to write. So introvert, right? You like to read, you like to write. But speaking is a whole different skill that I started to learn pretty late in life, I think.
The way you think just makes everything sound so simple and straightforward. Um, it's interesting because I think sometimes, maybe as women, I don't know, but sometimes we have a tendency to overcomplicate things. But it doesn't
Yeah,
sound like it's like that in your world.
it's better now, to be honest. And I think it's learning to find that clarity and then being guided by what you read as well. I mean, Maya Angelou is beautiful in how she says something sometimes in just one line, and she expresses a world of meaning in there. So I think all that has helped me. Or even Einstein, E equals mc squared. It's simple and elegant and beautiful. It's not like a whole whiteboard of equations, which is what it took for him to get to that simple formula. But I think I'm seeing the value of distilling this down, like, to the essence. What is this? What do I want? Why am I frustrated? And then clear it, do something. What is the problem? Where is the pain point here with this technology and this vertical? How do I figure this out? So I think it's been a lifelong, process almost. And that's where, in a way, because that's part of the reason I was drawn to social psychology, is that I want to apply it to myself.
Yeah, I was going to say. I mean, you talk about it in technological terms, but it could be such a useful approach to life.
Yeah, and be curious about yourself too. I think, being a little an observer of yourself is a really good thing. And observe yourself scientifically, not as much as you can. We can do it. We all have filters, but try to see that truth. At least you can own it to yourself if you can't even tell it to the world. Some things, okay, maybe this is my dark side, or and then own it, and then things become clear. And it's really beautiful when you're able to do even that a little bit. You feel so, I don't know, in harmony, I guess, and people sense it.
Do you use any particular techniques to find that clarity? Like, for example, you are reminding me of the importance of meditation, which I adore. Um,
Yeah, I do like the stillness. And like I told you, like, even in a noisy, you know, crowded customer environment, yeah, I want to get out and just sit somewhere quietly. And I found a little, and it's funny because I do this. I'm odd. I found a little space between a pillar and a ledge, and I just sat there. And somebody walked by and looked at me like, "Who's this strange person and what is she doing here?" But it's okay. And I'm like, just own it. Yeah, I'm strange.
yeah.
It doesn't matter. and and I think that helps me, even if it's like just what you talked about, meditation. I mean, I haven't followed any formal meditation techniques, but I want to do that quiet stillness and then look for what am I, because our brain is giving us all these signals and we feel discomfort about something or whatever, and we need to figure out what it is so we can solve that problem. And I think you have to find that way to just listen and be truthful to yourself, and then you can find authentic solutions. I think you find better solutions to your own life, but also to technology or problems. Or
So was STEM just easy? Did you just sail through school?
no, I could have, but I think I went through the typical teenage thing of I don't need to do this, I don't care. You zone out. School sometimes was boring, classes were boring. And so I in high school, I know I could have done much better in terms of grades, but I didn't. When I was young, I used to get perfect grades all the time. And then the teenage years, a little bit of whatever, I don't care. And then coming back again into university, when I did the combination of my software engineering and psychology, I was fully immersed in school. Like I was like, my God, my brain is growing in all these directions. I want to do it all. I want to be a student my whole life. And then, eventually I'm like, no, no, I want to graduate. I want to get a job, see what it's like in the real world. So it was not easy. No, I did struggle with, even with math sometimes. Some things were very easy, but, definitely there were areas of math that I struggled with, discrete mathematics, for example. And even some of the concepts in physics, I mean, I don't think you need to be an Einstein to grasp them, some of those things
Mm.
which are out of reach, but fascinating, but out of reach. So,
So were there ever any thoughts to quit?
to quit this field, you mean? Huh? No, actually, no.
Because it happens to a lot of
That's
women
true.
who take
True, true,
physics.
true. And you can't keep up. It's intense and it's grueling. And you're right, actually. I did have a couple girlfriends in school who switched majors and all that.
Yeah. How come that didn't affect you? Did you have a good support network, or did you just have a very strong inner resolve that this was the right path for you?
A little bit of, I think I had a feeling of, they call it like you have too much invested to quit.
Yeah.
So even when I got interested in psychology in school, and I actually considered pursuing it full time, and my professor was pushing me to do it, but I was like, no, I think I stick with engineering. And I like that even in my psychology class, I brought a different perspective because of the engineering side in me, where we did like, some critical thinking where you take apart certain, item in the news and then you see, is this real or not? Or where are the holes in this thing? Or why is it written in a way to condition to appeal to our biases? So I do see that I bring a little bit of that into the art world, and I love the creative side and everything too of life and world, and just art and artists and all that.
Mm.
But I look at things differently. It's funny because even when I buy shoes, I look at them differently from my sister, who's more in the artistic world. And she looks at the aesthetics of the shoe, and I'm looking at the engineering. I'm like, I love this shoe because, the structure is so good and it fits
Balance.
and it feels,
Yeah.
and yeah. And she's like, but they're ugly. And I'm like, I don't see the ugliness. It's like, I see the beauty of the design.
I often ask women this question in my podcasts. What does having it all mean to you?
Oh, that's a good question because you're always juggling, balancing. I think having it all means to me is, that's a difficult one. You never can have it all. Life will never give you everything. I mean, in my own case, I've got amazing friends, family, and all this, but I'm missing a big piece of what people have. I don't have kids. I was not able to have kids. And that's a big gap, right? But I have fulfillment in other areas. And don't look for having it all. I think look for finding ways to just embrace what you have. And then if you're not really happy with what you're doing, for example, or your job, or you're feeling powerless, I think that's kind of the biggest handicap. Feeling powerful and feeling that you are contributing, to me, that's having it all. Having respect for myself and for others, and having that reflected back to me. Those are the things
Mm.
I think that matter. Because if you look for, I need to have this, I need to have the home, I need to have the family, I need to have peace with whatever, you're not going to get that.
Yeah, because I think women are under so much pressure to, not just have the successful career, but also to be mothers and to just juggle so many things on top of what men juggle.
Yeah. And to be do all that and also to smile. Do you know how many times women get told, just smile? You're not smiling. Why?
Yeah.
And it's less now, but 10 years ago, it was even worse. I think some of the stuff that's coming out in social media is helping change some of those conversations.
Mm,
But
yeah.
I heard from another woman who would tell people, sometimes in frustration that, well, my grandma passed away, just to get them to stop telling her to smile when she didn't feel like smiling.
Yeah, we've got a lot on our minds.
Yeah, and I don't I don't have to. So that's kind of some of the things that we women face more than men do. Men in engineering even can be cantankerous and cranky and get away with it. And they don't, it doesn't ding them even on their performance reviews. I mean, it's one thing that they get away with it in a meeting or something, but managers have, a lot of managers are male and they have that blind spot. So that's one thing I looked into because I started getting into a lot of, we have business groups for women and gender diversity councils and all that.
Mm,
And I kind of approached it with that engineering mindset, like what are, and there's a lot of women doing some of this work, where, the feedback that women get is very personal. And it's also, women get a lot more corrective feedback at work than men do, at least in the IT and technology industry.
interesting.
So, yeah, and you get told things that are personal qualities like, oh, you're very patient, you're very nice. Nice doesn't tell you how I do my job. Nice doesn't belong in a performance evaluation, right? And nice belongs in a family setting or in, your friends, whatever. Or you get the what's called the grindstone word, like you're very hardworking. So it tells you that you're working hard, but it's not talking about my achievements.
Yeah.
It's not using words like dynamic, like, productive. There's a difference between hardworking and productive, and that's my problem.
Why is that vocabulary used for women? Do you think it's very female specific?
It is. I think it is, and I think part of it is not that it's m- because we are a minority, and it's changing. I see the evolution of things changing for the better, but what I've seen is that sometimes guys, they don't know how to deal with women as colleagues. They think of me like, I had a manager. He was very, very nice early in my career, and he sort of saw me as more of a daughter figure than, you know, something else. So the personal qualities, right? And I'm friendly and whatever. So maybe, we had a good personal interaction, but that was hurting me because he was trying to shelter me from the mean colleagues, the ones who are nasty and everything, and keeping me from those opportunities in a way. I saw that. He didn't mean to do it. But he was trying to protect me too much, and that's not good for me as an employee. I need to learn to deal with it, right? I'm not dating the guy. I'm in a meeting with him, and if he's yelling, scold him for yelling or being nasty. Don't try to shield me from it. So there is some of that. I think they don't know how to deal with women sometimes as a coworker, as an equal. They see you as a mom, or you're like my daughter, you're thin like her, or you're this like her. Or once it was really funny because I got a feedback from my manager telling me, because I was fighting for my team, trying to do something. This was when I was a team lead, and he said, "Oh, you're a good mom." I'm like, "Excuse me, these guys are 15 years older than me. I am not their mother, and I do not want to be."
Yeah.
That means they can act like babies, right? And I have to be the mom. I mean, it was just wrong. Nothing wrong with being a mom, but that's not what I'm bringing
Yeah.
here.
So do you want to be seen to be like gender neutral, or because some women might enjoy that kind of feminine appreciation?
It's nice. I tell my managers too, or whoever, these days I talk a lot more about this topic with some of the guys on my team. And what I say, it's lovely that you give me the personal compliment, but don't let that diminish, what I'm bringing
Mm,
to the table.
yeah.
And sometimes and I kind of encourage them, and I tell them, even the guys on my team, like, you're going to be leaders tomorrow, so I don't want you doing this. See us and try to change your, just changing those words changes your thoughts. So it's not just with psychology, this, right? It's not just your attitude that drives your behavior. If you alter one or two things of your behavior, it changes your attitude. So if you start using words like this, or just watch, am I doing this in my performance review, or when I talk about a male colleague versus a female colleague, let me just change that word to something else. And we've got organizations like the National Center for Women in IT, which put together a little brochure on the kinds of words to use, right? So it gives you a suggested list, like don't say hardworking, maybe say productive, because that's much better. Or if she's really doing something, call her a dynamic leader or show proactive. Use those stronger words for either
Mm.
gender. And and it's been interesting to have those conversations, and I think women should be feminine, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we've seen with the hashtag I look like an engineer, if
Yeah,
you're familiar
I
with
am.
that one.
Yeah.
That was fabulous. And and be yourself. I think that's the really good. You can do that, but watch for these things. Watch for somebody diminishing a little bit of your work, and definitely do not let yourself be professionally disrespected, because sometimes that happens too. Oh yeah, whatever, she's nice, so she gets along with all these colleagues. Excuse me, she makes the effort to do it, right? She makes the effort to get the job done despite maybe this colleague is difficult or
Mm.
whatever. And and I think that's what needs to be a little more clear. Without, and my style is not to be confrontational too much. It's more like, let's talk about this, and let's talk like sensibly. Look, these are the words and these are the words. And like I told one of my male colleagues about this story where I was called a good mom, and I said, a guy would never get that feedback. If he was taking care of his team, it would be a completely different word used for him. He would never be told, oh, you're such a good dad, you take care of
Mm.
your team. He would never. And he nodded. He's like, holy crap, yeah.
Yeah,
So
I mean, honestly, it's so complex. Because I think as
hmm
women, I think fundamentally, don't we all, male or female, just want to be appreciated? And when we are
yes.
appreciated because we're nice or we're hardworking, that can often be very confusing. Because I wouldn't want
Yes,
to be spoken to as though I'm a man, yet I wouldn't want to be spoken to um, in a softer way because I'm female. So I don't actually know. I don't know what I
exactly.
want. So it's kind of,
I know.
how do you deal with kind of trying to define oneself in a working environment?
Yeah. And I wouldn't be too harsh because sometimes it's well
Yeah.
meaning. So to me, I couldn't see myself shutting someone down. It's so funny because the things I get to hear. One time I was at a trade show and people were being, very friendly, very nice. One customer VP came to me and said, oh, you smell good. I'm like, oh my God. But he didn't
Yeah.
mean it, he meant it in, I think there's an awkwardness. Like they
They're
don't
trying to
mean.
compliment you.
Yeah. And the thing is that in a lot of times like this, I'm the only woman who organizes the technology side of the demo and who presents it too. So it's just one of me. And sometimes you get this, you just laugh it off. It's okay. I don't want to, jump on them for everything, but I kind of try to say it some where I can. And I say, okay, that's good, but don't you think I'm doing a good job as well? Or something like that, sometimes in a lighthearted way, but and make them aware, and sometimes with more serious conversations with, especially people in leadership roles. And I found
Mm.
that you need to work, like, especially when we start out in our career, we don't feel the power to do this. And somehow I wish that would change, that we could feel empowered to learn that you need to manage your manager a little bit too. Like say, hey, this is what I'm like and this is what I like. And it's really sweet that you say this, but would would you understand if I told you that this is what I want? Just find a way, a neutral or a nice way to say this. And that would be really good. And I didn't do that early in my career because it's lovely to be said that you're a nice person, and
Yeah.
makes you feel good.
I think kind of talking about all these different examples and your experience and my experience, I think ultimately the conclusion is that we have to just be comfortable with ourselves.
Yeah,
Because men, it, to be honest, it sounds like men are sometimes clueless as to how to deal with us, particularly if we are a minority in
yeah,
something like,
yeah.
engineering. And so rather than trying to change others, it's probably better and easier if we just learn how to change ourselves. And at the root of changing ourselves, we have to have conviction about who we are.
That I totally agree with that. Have the conviction of who you are, and sometimes the changing ourselves gets taken a little too far. Where you see, like what I said, women get a lot more corrective feedback. You're great, but here is something you need to change, and
But I'm sure men get that as well, don't they?
not as much, not as much. That's the interesting thing that the research has shown, and we dug into this a little bit because I was, a rep on some of these National Center for Women in IT and others, and we had a bunch of women and academics and people from government, and we would all sit and talk about this and kind of try to distill it down. So they've done a lot of research on performance evaluations because that's sometimes the gating factor, right? Your performance evaluation can determine whether you get ranked as outstanding and whether you get that next promotion, or whether you're ranked as good, or better than average
Mm.
but not outstanding. So there is a subtlety there, and those are the things we are trying to, at least that's what fascinates me, is how we phrase things, and how, so it goes back to putting the communication, right? How do we say this? you, you say, because I think men feel more comfortable telling us to correct something compared to a man confronting another man sometimes. It's a little odd. I mean, it's at a subtle level. It's not often very blatant. There are those cases too, but on the whole I believe people are trying to do the
Mm.
right thing, and most people are. And one other thing that you mentioned is, it's true that men, I think, are emotionally coddled a little bit, so they don't know how to express certain things. And with engineers, the stereotype is we don't have the best social skills, right? A lot of
Yeah.
engineers. And I think they don't understand how to express themselves. So that's why they put you in the box of, okay, being a friend or being a daughter or being a whatever, a mom. They can't see that you don't belong in one box, you go across. So I feel like we women, we do this to the men as well, like even in our families and all that, especially given all this stuff coming out with Me Too and all these horror stories that we're seeing, that everyone's gone through some form of harassment, right? If you're a woman. But how many of us have told our fathers or our husbands or our brothers that this has
Mm.
happened to me? Because we worry that they won't be able to handle it. We worry that, either they'll overreact, or something, we break their heart or something, so we protect them, and they don't know the extent of the problem sometimes because we haven't told them that, hey, this happens to me, almost once a year.
But the sad thing about that is that we end up having to carry that by ourselves. And I
Yeah,
think that's why I
yeah,
started a podcast like this, because, there's a lot of, there are a lot of resources out there that really support women who
yeah,
are, um, starting their own businesses, or, learning to code, or whatever it is. But there's very little out there that actually provides emotional support. And I think that's a
yeah.
major aspect of becoming a, a successful career woman.
I think so. I think there needs to be something like that where you, and as a woman, we, in general, as a gender, we tend to use the word sorry a lot more
Yeah.
compared to men. So
Why
there's
do we
all
do
these little
that?
things, and I don't know. And being aware of it can help us change it. And it's as simple as dropping one word from your sentence.
Mm.
And this is the kind of training you need. And I think this is some of the power of how we communicate that's really changed my life in a way. Because I did all of these things. I would be like, okay, you're very doubtful when you're putting forward an
Yeah.
opinion, even though you may know it. And now it's like, okay, I'm not sure, but I think this is what it is. And to have that confidence to say it that way is really good. And to say it without saying sorry and this and that, because as soon as you do that, its human reaction is to diminish what that person is saying or not hear it as closely. We are all drawn to powerful people, right? When they talk, we listen. We all do it. It's a human
Mm.
response. And somewhere we need to learn these things as we get into the workplace. So it's like developing those battle skills
Yeah.
without it being a battle, right? Just learning to arm yourself, like, this is something you need to fix, and go with it. And the guys too, they need to learn that, because there's a lot of knee-jerk reaction with the men as well sometimes, right? When they see a woman as head of whatever, they're like, oh well, maybe this is a company that's just doing this to get some quotas
Yeah.
in and all that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's that immaturity there, right? So we just need to break those walls a little bit and say, hey, we are working this hard and we deserve this. So I don't know, but I'm glad it's changing.
I'm really trying to kind of work out in my head why it is that women doubt themselves so much, because I see it not just in young women and girls, but I also see it kind of with women that have experience in their
Yeah,
careers. There's always this hesitation.
no,
Um,
true.
is it a fear of failure? Is it, I mean, where does it come from? Because men certainly have that less, and they have that less with less knowledge as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's something that I'm wondering, because I see it more now with some of my peers. And it's a couple of days ago, I was talking to an old friend of mine, and she was telling me, very, very negative about herself. So I think self deprecation and modesty is one thing, but self disrespect, that's not okay. And the way she was telling me is like, I'm doing this. And, she told me she signed up for a half marathon. And I'm like, wow, okay, she's never run before. Okay. So this is something she's doing. And she's like, I don't know. I'm always doing these crazy things. And the way she's telling it in such a negative way, I'm like, girl, be proud of what you are. You're multi talented. You like a lot of different things. And she's kind of questioning herself and apologizing for who she is because she's not focused on one straight line. I'm like, you don't need to be like that. If you're not like that, just own it and say, yeah, I drifted, I did this, I'm okay. Who not everyone's a super specialist. There are some who are, and you're not, so it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, when I listen to you, I it sounds extremely logical, very clear, obvious almost.
Yeah,
To put that into practice is an
yeah,
entirely different
it
thing.
is.
I mean, I almost want to bottle what you're saying and just take a big gulp every time I
Mm,
feel self-doubt kind of coming over me. But it's just so hard. Maybe it's the societies we live in where there's just a lot of pressure, or there's a lot of um, judgment in
mhm.
being different and just being unusual. And I think, you know, mm, be proud of being different is something that really has to come from within. We're not going to be
Yes.
able to get that approval from outside of ourselves.
No, you will never get it. And there'll be always those who call you weird or
Yeah.
stupid or, try to, because they want to succeed. Some people want to succeed by tearing you down. And you got to be able to see that and say, no, this is not who I am. They may think so, but because that becomes very toxic. Yeah.
So is that kind of approach something that you have always practiced? Because I get the impression that you have always been quite cocooned by your confidence, your inner confidence, not arrogance, which is something entirely different, but your inner confidence has buffered you from the opinions of others outside of you. And has that been your approach?
Yes and no. No, it's changed. So I think in my younger days, I was very self critical. It didn't matter that somebody else was scolding me, for example, like my mom or whoever, outside a teacher, whatever, because I would scold myself much worse. I was, in a way, the inner voice in your head, and that voice was kind to others but harsh to my own self. And somewhere I read about this, and I think reading has opened my world up with Maya Angelou and all these wonderful,
Mm.
role models that you have, powerful women. And one of the things, one day it struck me, somebody told me this, and I said, be kind to yourself. And then I started doing that a little bit more actively. You have to do it actively. It doesn't just happen one fine day that, you get all this confidence. No, you have to work at it.
Yeah. And it is work, isn't it?
It is, it is. It's a constant being your own therapist, your own cheerleader. And in fact, one day I even wrote it down on my, I have a little scrapbook that I scribble notes on when I'm upset or something. And long back, so a few years ago, I wrote it down like, I am my own cheerleader. Who cares if nobody else cheers me? I will cheer myself. So I've had like bad years where I didn't really grow or do anything. I just hid. And I'm so glad that I got out of that. I don't know. But it takes time, and you got to do it. We are so good to our friends or to our kids, or you'll nurture them, but we don't take that advice and apply it to our inner self. We criticize everything we do. Oh, I don't look good. I don't do this. I'm confused. So I'm interested in too many things.
Most of us, particularly women in STEM, I think, because it's such a logical way of
Yeah.
being, isn't it? And I think a lot of women in STEM are always striving to be better. And it's that constant striving to be better that means that you're usually quite critical all the time, because we're not looking at the achievements. We're constantly looking at where we lack so that we
Yes.
can acquire in that area. And that can really chip away at one's
Yeah.
self-esteem, I think.
And a lot of times, especially when you're the only woman on a team or something, you're the only one that's different. So you're more self conscious. So you're more, and sometimes some workplaces are more hostile than others, right? So you will not get that nurturing from your team, for example, if you're the only woman sometimes. And
Yeah.
that feeds in on itself like, oh, I don't, the imposter syndrome, I don't belong here.
Yeah.
What am I doing? I should go back and take care of my family or do this instead. And
Yeah.
nothing wrong with doing that, but don't hide. I think that's what we tend to do, and it's very natural to do that. But I mean, I keep talking about Maya Angelou, but what she said is so true. Surviving is important, but thriving is elegant. And
Oh,
that was
I love
beautiful.
that.
I love
Yeah.
it. I had it on my whiteboard at work, and it it became a mantra, in a way you tell yourself these things. Yeah, okay, I'm surviving, but I'm not thriving because I'm not feeling that joy of coming into work and doing something. And then slowly you start to take those baby steps, even if to to gain your own respect and your confidence and say, no, I know this. So let me say it clearly and,
Mm.
speak up.
Yeah.
And that'll keep that frustration from going inwards. It'll help you to overcome some things. And you radiate that in a way sometimes. And then people start to accept you that, okay, this one, yeah, she can, she owns it. She can do it.
Mm.
And when you hesitate and say something, like we know it and we may be leading a project, but we sometimes women, we tend to be a little timid in how we express ourselves, or we don't own it completely,
Yeah.
warts and all. Like if there's a mistake, hey, I'm the one in charge, I did it. We don't hide, we don't panic. And I think that comes slowly over time, but it takes work. You got to keep reminding yourself, okay, get out there, do this.
And that comes from a very empowered place, owning our
Yeah,
failures, actually, which is an
it does.
amazing. I'm just having an epiphany right now because,
Mhm.
you know, fear of failure is something that
Oh,
kind of
yes.
haunts a lot of us women in STEM. And the idea of actually owning failure is very empowering to think about that.
It is. And just telling ourselves what's the worst that can happen.
Mm.
Okay. And, sometimes I see that we tend to, the script in our head is what's, keeping us in that cycle. Like what you said a little few minutes before was we like what I'm telling you sounds so logical, but yet, we question. And I do this with some of my friends where some of them are really stuck in this rut of questioning themselves a
Mm.
lot. And I'm like, is that a form of self-indulgence in a way that I'm only looking at myself and question? Should I not look outside and say, this is my contribution? This is what,
Right.
where we want to go towards something rather than just keep telling myself, like, oh, I can't do this. I didn't do this right. I didn't do that right. And I think we tell ourselves no and I can't a lot. And if we start slowly saying, okay, I cannot do all this, but here's what I can do, and then just it's a baby thing, but celebrate that and sort of use that as your new addiction.
Gosh, honestly, I wish I could just talk to you for hours because I feel like you have a wisdom that is I mean, I've met you in person and you do radiate this power, but it's not like a loud kind of uh, kind of noisy attention grabbing power. It's a very um, quietly just I don't know how to describe it, but it's like an energy that is so attractive that comes from just knowing. It's like an inner knowing of your value.
It's about tapping into that. I think I see it, I'm, a scientist, but I see some things, what you talk about energy is true. Uh, and sometimes I feel like I used to be more overwhelmed by the energy in the room. And I didn't think that I have the power to transform the energy in this room, right? And that's a powerful thing to think about. Maybe when I walk into the room, I change the energy of the room. And I definitely have to credit some of this with Toastmasters and learning how to project myself a little bit more. And suddenly I tapped into something that I realized is liberating. Like, okay, these people, they don't want to hear what I have to say, but I'm just going to go and see what I can do. And I think just knowing that one person, and you have that sometimes, right? We know that one person who walks into the room and the room lights up in a way. And I'm like, I wish I could be that person. Maybe that's what I want to go towards. And
And the only thing that's probably stopping you from being that person is you.
yes, in fact, it's been really good for me to engage with the guys on some of these topics. And one of the guys told me that the fact that I am emotional at work as well, and I tell people, yeah, I'm emotional about my work because I care, whatever. And I had a manager who did this, where sometimes when women we are frustrated, the tears come out. It's not
Mm.
a sign of weakness, but it is what it is.
Sign of caring.
Yeah, and one of my senior managers, yeah, she was, I mean, when she left and went to a different company, and she said she was going to have a heated discussion with her bosses, and she kind of explained to them beforehand that, hey, sometimes when I'm frustrated, the tears will come. It doesn't mean I'm, weeping because of, sad or whatever. So she kind of owned it. And I thought that was so powerful for a senior manager to go in and say, hey, if I cry, this is why I cry.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
I can't bring myself to see myself doing that, because most of us, what do we do? We go run into the bathroom and cry. And to be that person and to say, yeah, I am an engineer, but I'm also emotional, and the two are not mutually exclusive, right?
But it's also accepting yourself for who you are, which is the most powerful thing you can do.
And men have emotions too. And one of the things that one of the guys told me, and this is in a Nordic country where they're a little more stoic, but what he told me was so powerful. He told me that one day I got really emotional about something was not working. I get like this sometimes when the project, things are not working. And then and I said, I'm sorry, I'm getting very emotional. And he said, no, no, you being emotional gives us permission to be emotional too. So it's okay.
Yeah.
And I felt so good that with these guys, some of them, bring them with us. We can lead them. Don't just think that I want to be their equal. Think of, there's something I can give to these guys and lead them into a better place of comfortable. We are okay with the complexities of life and emotions, and let's bring that into the workplace too, and
Yeah.
kind of help them, talk to them about this and, see.
Yeah, I mean, I think women can be leaders. There's absolutely no question about that, but we have to believe that we are bringing something valuable to the table. And the more women that do that, the more women will follow in their footsteps.
Yeah. And the stereotype of women is we are more collaborative, and it's true to a lot of extent, right? And maybe that's what we do. So I had a male manager once, question me because we had a bunch of different teams and all with leads, and I was one of the leads, but I was the only female lead on all the teams that he had. So he one day questioned me out of the blue on, he didn't think I was tough enough because he said he kind of told me that I'm too polite in my emails, pretty much is what he told me, which is shocking. But he said, well, I have this one so and so engineer, and he's known to be very cranky, very obnoxious, whatever. I mean, how will you deal with him? And at the time, I was flustered because he just blindsided me with this. I didn't know this is why he called me. He just gave it to me like all this stuff, like, you know, if I need to put someone on a plane, will it be you? Who will be? And I'm like, okay, has there been a problem in the team or what I've done? And he said, no, he's just thinking of potential problems. And I said, okay, if there's a problem, I will step down and somebody else can take over. But I was like, what are you trying to do? And of course, later you think of all the clever answers you could have given, right? But at the time, later then it made me think. And I said, well, what I would do with that cranky, obnoxious engineer is probably I would make friends with him, I can do this. Like I go and just smile and say, "Hey, how are you?" And maybe he's cranky because he's hungry, and sometimes that's what it is. It's so simple,
Mm.
right? Life, and and or then later I thought about it some more, and I said, "Well, if he's cranky and obnoxious, you should be correcting him and not telling me."
Yeah.
And it just opened me up and made me think of all this stuff. And then I started saying, okay, next time this happens, these are going to be my answers. So I had to prepare myself for next time. And a couple times he blindsided me like this, and I knew he was putting me under more scrutiny because I was a woman, but it was not something I could tell him. I didn't want to, say that. But once he told me something where he said, because I do collaborate, and I chat with these people, and I'm more friendly, I guess. And so once he told me something that he thought would really hurt me, where he said, I don't know why he did this. He liked pushing my buttons. And he said, not everyone likes you.
Yeah.
I'm
Trying to
like,
topple you.
and that day, yeah, that day, fortunately, I was in this mind space and I gave the perfect answer, I think. And I said, oh, don't worry, I have friends and family for my emotional needs. And he just shut up. And then after that, I think things
Wow,
changed.
that's such a powerful statement.
And it was very calm and from the heart. And, I'm thinking like, I don't come into work for emotional
Yeah.
support. I
Oh,
really
I
don't.
love that.
And
Wow.
and then I was so pleased with myself the whole day. I was like, damn, for once, I got the right answer out. But I think we need to start
Standing
preparing
up for
ourselves for these.
ourselves.
And yeah, and we know that we'll be blindsided every now and then.
Mm,
But hey, that can happen once. It can happen twice. Don't let it happen multiple times.
mm. It's just been incredible talking to you because I really, in everything you've said, there's such a strong sense of self respect and self belief. And I think really that is the root of how you have carried yourself through your career and, um, ended up becoming the successful woman that you are. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. I feel like I would love to have a 3 hour long conversation with you because there's just so much wisdom to draw on. But hopefully, in the short time that we've had to chat, some of your secrets to resilience has shined through. So thank you for coming on this podcast.
Thank you so much. Yes, we all have our superpowers.
Let those superpowers out. That's it from my STEM guest this week. How amazing to have self-acceptance and just a true care for one's own well-being. And When I think about it, it makes total sense. I mean, my speaker would just had so much clarity on it, but it really does seem obvious that, no one's going to kind of love you the way you can love yourself. And it seems as though in having that kind of self-love, you can really be of service to others and contribute to the world your best self. Thank you so much for listening this week. Don't forget to subscribe and catch you next week on Scilence.